The last 6 seasons for the Atlanta Falcons have seen 5 7-win seasons and 6 seasons in which not only did they not make the playoffs, they didn't have a record above 500 winning percentage. Um, they were expected to be a bad team in terms of what the analytics said after the season, but before the season, we thought that they not only could win the NFC South, they could possibly be a double-digit win team and be a team that hosting in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta could be a team that could win a playoff game. Now, we saw over the year that Desmond Ridder probably is not the quarterback of the future for the Atlanta Falcons. We saw that the playmakers on this team are actually really good, regardless of how bad the quarterback play is. And we saw that the defense has a lot to improve upon. Now, look, the good thing for the Atlanta Falcons is even though they were expected to be a good team this year, they weren't expected to win a Super Bowl. They weren't expected to go to the NFC Championship game. They just were expected to be a good team. And they failed expectations of that, but by only a few games. And the biggest change, I think, already is that the complete overhaul of the coaching staff, starting with firing Arthur Smith maybe 45 minutes after that 30-point loss to the New Orleans Saints. Now, that game followed a 20-point loss to the Chicago Bears in a 2-week stretch where they got outscored by 51 points combined to the Chicago Bears and New Orleans Saints. And those two games come 2 weeks after they lost back-to-back NFC South divisional games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers. Now, this is going to be a guide on the offseason. What happened last season, it's no longer the conversation. So starting with free agency for this team, in terms of what their own free agents look like, the main player, or I guess the main few players that need to either be attempted to be re-signed or just re-signed. I mean, say what you want about some of these players, but they're just good players to have. Defensively, I think you should be trying to bring back guys like Jeff Okudah, Bud Dupree, and Nathan Landman. The rest of their defensive free agents, there's not a lot really to begin with. Calais Campbell, Contavious Street, Albert Huggins, Trey Flowers. Calais Campbell will hurt to lose, but it's not a loss of massive proportions. Offensively is where a majority of their free agents lie. You have names like Cordero Patterson, Mac Hollins, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, Michael Pruitt, and some offensive linemen that are decent but not game changers for you. Matt Hennessy is probably the guy they need to bring back because outside of Matt Hennessy, they don't have any other centers other than Drew Dalman, who I don't think they want to play. And so I think that is the change going forward. Or not the change, but that's the issue to address going forward. So re-sign Bud Dupree, re-sign Nathan Landman, re-sign Jeff Okudah, and then probably bring back Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller because the wide receiver room in Atlanta, if you just say none of those guys come back, it's Drake London, Austin Mack, Josh Allen, and Chris Blair. 1 first-round pick and 3 guys you probably have never heard of. Other than that, offensively, if they can't get a quarterback like a Kirk Cousins or, if they can't trade for Justin Fields, which is something we will talk about later, I wouldn't really touch the offense outside of adding to the wide receiver room. The offense is fine skill-wise. I think last year, the reason that they were the 26th scoring offense and they were 26 in scoring 2 out of the last 3 years under Arthur Smith was that man's fault alone, and Arthur Smith. I've already made the mention, but the complete switch for the Atlanta Falcons is going from defensively from a 4-3 last year to a 3-4 this year under new defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake. And so that sort of thought process needs to be followed when they are trying to sign free agents. Now, depending on what you think about a 3-4, I love it. I like 4-3 more, but I love a 3-4. I love a good 3-4. Defensively, and this is if there's a complete change to a 3-4, I wouldn't be surprised. Jimmy Lake has had a lot of success with guys like Von Miller. He's had a lot of success turning guys into something. There's a guy for the LA Rams who I'm sure many of you don't know, but his name is Michael Hoyt. And he was basically like a 6'1" or 2, 300-something pound D tackle. And Jimmy Lake was able to put him in a position to be a solid rotational outside linebacker. Now, Michael Hoyt is somebody I would target if I'm the Atlanta Falcons because of his success under Jimmy Lake. I would be targeting guys like Sheldon Rankins, Chase Young, Michael Dunna, Leonard Floyd, Josh Uche, Devin White, Willie Gay Jr., Ahkello Witherspoon, another guy who was a player under Jimmy Lake's system for the LA Rams last year, and who had a really good year with the LA Rams last year. He played a lot. He played a majority of the defensive snaps for LA last year. Switching to the offensive side of the ball for free agents, this is going to be where, the main need for Atlanta when they are addressing their offense in terms of who to sign, who to not target, it's going to be the wide receiver position that they really need to make a big swing at. And Mike Evans is available. There's other big name wide receivers available. The one I'm going for is Michael Pittman Jr. I think Michael Pittman Jr. is in an incredible position to take off in the next couple of years. And I think Atlanta could be an incredible situation for him to do that. He would be the obvious number one. Drake London would be the number two. And if Atlanta can either draft a wide receiver in the draft this year, or if they can sign another guy, names who I would target DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, Noah Brown, very good supplemental pieces for a wide receiver core. But Michael Pittman Jr. would be the guy I would go for. He would take up a lot of the cap room that they have. And with that being said, I would look to move somebody if I can. I would look to move a Jake Matthews, possibly. He would create a lot of dead cap, so I wouldn't necessarily think that's a great idea. Grady Jarrett is probably the guy I would look at trading if I can. And that would free up about $12 million in cap space if they're able to move him. And so if they could do it, I would love it. If they can't, like I said, get guys like DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, Noah Brown, and then probably another receiver. Like I said, they probably should re-sign Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller, but that's not enough if you are wanting to be winning the NFC South next year, especially if Mike Evans goes back to Tampa Bay, because Tampa Bay not only has the best wide receiver core in the NFC South, they probably have one of the better wide receiver duos in NFL history with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So you need firepower to compete. Now, I mentioned earlier about the quarterback position for this team. I think it's pretty obvious Desmond Ridder is not it. I think it's pretty obvious that Taylor Heineke is not it. What I would do if I'm Atlanta, because I don't know if a lot of teams around the NFL are really going to be going for this guy. A lot of teams are going to be focused on the draft and taking a guy in the draft this year that need a quarterback. I would give Jake Browning anywhere from $8 to $12 million for 2 years to come in. And regardless if they draft a quarterback or not, there's a good chance they're not going to be able to. I would give Jake Browning a chance to win the starting position in Atlanta. And look, it can't get worse. And I think Jake Browning proved last year if he has talented weapons around him and he has a offensive coordinator and a head coach that actually believe in his ability to throw the ball, because he's in the NFL, he probably should have that trust with his coaches. I think if he has that in Atlanta, he's got a good defense. He's got a good receiver core if they fill it out right. This could be a team with Jake Browning who makes the playoffs, who wins the division, who hosts a playoff game. And I firmly believe that. I don't think Jake Browning is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think he could be an average quarterback, one of those average quarterbacks that can make a playoff game. And that's exactly what the Falcons need. Because if they're not going to get one of these elite quarterbacks in the draft, they have to get somebody who can win games for them. I also think Atlanta should go after Cam Akers. Cam Akers is still only 25. Why not have him as your third running back? Now let's move to the draft. And this is where we're going to talk about the possibility of trading for Justin Fields. So I think we all like Justin Fields. I think we all think Justin Fields can be a franchise quarterback, and he proved last year he could be a franchise quarterback. I still don't think he proved he is a franchise quarterback yet. So if you are asking me, should Atlanta trade for Justin Fields? It relies on two things. Are they giving up the first-round pick? And are the Chicago Bears going to give them a first-round pick either this year or next year? If one of or both of those things are true, I'm not doing the trade. And I should say it as this. If Chicago is not going to give up one of their first-round picks this year or next year, if that's not true and Atlanta has to give up their first-round pick for Justin Fields, you cannot do it. You cannot. This team, if they can't trade Grady Jarrett, they don't have enough cap space to address every need on this team and give up a first-round pick and probably give up a second and third-round pick this year. So you can't do it if you're Atlanta. What Justin Fields brings you is not enough to supplement losing a first-round pick and possible other draft compensation. And think about it like this as well. Atlanta was one of those teams that was rumored to be linked to Lamar Jackson last year when he was asking for a trade. And the deal was you need multiple first-round picks to be able to get Lamar Jackson. Atlanta was one of those teams that was linked to them. And is Justin Fields worth 75% of the trade that you would give up for Lamar Jackson? I think we all think no. Is he worth 50%? I think everyone listening to this would be split 50-50 between whether or not they believe that or not. And so you get to that point and it's like, well, we can't really make that trade. Regardless of what Chicago does with the number one overall pick, if they take Caleb Williams, as bad as that might be for Atlanta, because that would basically guarantee that they're not going to get one of either Williams, May, or Jaden Daniels, that's fine. Because all that means is the best players are going to start sliding down. And they're going to have their shot at a Brock Bowers if they really want to get 3 tight ends going, at an offensive tackle in either Fashanu or Alt. One of the wide receivers that they want between Neighbors, Adunze, any of the receivers available. Or they could trade down, which I think is the best possible option for them. Because if they trade from 8 to somewhere like 10 to 15, they're not really losing a lot of possibilities, because they need to address edge and they need to address wide receiver if they can't get that in free agency. And I mean, yeah, that's basically the point of this. So if they stick at 8, and let's just say for the sake of this video, regardless of who takes them, we're going to say Marvin Harrison, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May are all off the board. And we're also going to say Brock Bowers is off the board because I think the Chargers, that's just the most logical place for him to go is the Chargers. So Bowers, May, Harrison, Williams, and Jaden Daniels are all gone. Now, Fashanu or Alt are probably gone to Tennessee, and I would say one of either Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors is gone to the Giants. So you're at 8. You have your pick of either one of the offensive tackles, one of the receivers, or you could go with either Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Laiatu Latu. I would love if they went after Terry and Arnold. I think Terry and Arnold's going to be the best cornerback from this draft, and I think we're going to look back and think he probably should have been a top 10 pick. I just love Terry and Arnold. And that's pretty much it. In terms of, like, if they stay at number 8, that's pretty much it for guys that they should take. Like I said, I think they should trade back to maybe the 12 to 15 range. But if they stick at 8, regardless of who's there between the receivers and offensive tackles, I think you have to take somebody like Dallas Turner or Jared Verse. And for the sake of this video, I'm taking Dallas Turner. I think Dallas Turner is going to be a guy in this league. I think you look at what the trajectory of the edge rushers in the NFL is nowadays. He fits that mold. So does Jared Verse, but I think Dallas Turner, his production in college is just a little bit more there than Jared Verse's was. And, you can't really ever go wrong taking an edge rusher from Alabama. You can't. And so, with that all being said, I think you have to take Dallas Turner if you're there at 8. And then a look ahead for the rest of the offseason. In terms of the players that are on this team, I mean, you can't improve talent-wise more on this offense, I don't think, outside of the quarterback position. And like I said, I think they need to go after Jake Browning, or if they can somehow get into the top 3 of the draft, there's no real reason for them not to go after one of those Jake Browning, possibly even Carson Wentz quarterbacks that are available. Carson Wentz was the quarterback for the Rams last year, and Zach Robinson, who's the offensive coordinator for the Falcons this year, he was with the LA Rams the last 5 years as passing game coordinator, quarterbacks coach, all that stuff. And so that's a pretty easy fit between Carson Wentz and the Falcons now with Zach Robinson there. But I think Jake Browning is the perfect quarterback for them, in terms of you're not expecting a lot. You're not going to win the Super Bowl, but you're not going to be that terrible of a team. As long as there's trust in Jake Browning, as long as there's a full integration of him into the system, and as long as there's a fleshing out of the rest of this roster. And, defensively, it's kind of the same case. Now, the edge rusher position on this team needs addressing. They don't have a lot. Their best pass rusher right now is probably Grady Jarrett at the defensive tackle position. And they don't have much other than that production-wise on this roster. And the secondary didn't play great last year. They still were top 10 in terms of yards allowed. So, the defense last year just didn't get a lot of turnovers, and you can attribute a lot of that to the fact that they didn't have a pass rush. There's been no better time for the Atlanta Falcons to try to seize the NFC South. What team more than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this upcoming year is probably going to be predicted more as a first to worst team in their division than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? What team is going to have that prediction more? I don't think any of us think the Saints are going to be a good team next year if Derek Carr is still the quarterback. And I think we saw enough from Bryce Young last year to say he might be a bust. He might be. He needs 1 to 2 more years, but he might be a bust. And either way, the Panthers aren't good. They don't have any skill position players that you really think jump off the page. Adam Thielen played out of his mind last year. Someone had to get stats on that team. So there's no better position for the Atlanta Falcons than to go all in this year and try everything they can to win this division, because they could host the playoff game. They could win a playoff game in Atlanta, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They could do it if they do everything right.